Hello, this is Peter Falk, and you're listening to the Columbo Files on the Ludic Lounge, hosted by Antonicus, Maximus, and John Soares. Hello, loyal listeners? I said listeners.
You did say listeners.
I did say listeners. That's the kind of show we're in for this week, folks. Welcome to the Columbo Files. I am one of your co-hosts, courtesy of the Ludic Lounge, John Soares. And with me, as always, is the man, the myth, the legend, the gluteus, to the Maximus, Antonicus Gluteus Maximus IV. Say hello to some people, Anthony.
Hello to some people. Now, John, before we jump into that, and speaking of hello to the people, we here at the Ludic Lounge, especially here for the Columbo Files, John and I, we want to give a special shout out to a couple listeners of the Columbo File who reached out to us via email and said some very nice and positive things. So Michael C., as well as Jackie, if you're out there, hopefully I pronounced your guys' names correctly. If you're out there, if you're listening, we want to say we appreciate it from the bottom of our cold, cold hearts that you enjoy this passion project of John and I. And we hope we continue to get your patronage as we continue and stumble our way through all 60-plus episodes of the Columbo Files.
Where we will get a lot more information on how the FCC is weird.
Yeah.
I mean, we're bound to find that a lot more often as we go along this winding road. The long and winding road. Had to get my McCartney in there somehow, right? All right, Anthony. We have a pretty great episode this week.
John, I am not going to hyperbolically say that this is my favorite episode, but I'm just going to straight up tell you that honestly, from the bottom of my heart, this is probably my favorite episode, at least thus far.
I agree. It sneaks up on you. It's got a lot of meaty things I think we're going to have a pretty good discussion about. So without further ado, Anthony, I think it's time to get into our cast and crew this week. So starting off the list, besides Peter Falk, we have our murderer of Susan Clark playing Beth Chadwick. Anthony, would you like to take the lead with Susan Clark?
Yes, I would, John. Our Lady in Waiting herself, which is the title of the episode, which we forgot to say. Lady in Waiting herself is the actress Susan Clark. Now, Susan Clark, John, and loyal listeners listening at home, she was working in Hollywood back in the year 1963. Born in Canada, though, John.
Oh, yeah, eh?
No, her notable works.
Thank you for just bypassing that.
Yes. Her notable works and where she got one of her breaks. And again, loyal listeners listening at home, maybe this is your first time listening. When I say notable works, I say most common things that if I can recognize it, anyone can recognize them from. And the notable works I'm speaking of regarding one Susan Clark this week is The Benny Hill Show, John.
There are some women in this show, and they are scantily clad.
Yep. And the TV movie, Amelia Earhart, where she played the titular role of Amelia Earhart.
Now, Anthony, some things I learned about Susan Clark. She was one of the few who received one of the last studio contracts of the old studio system of Hollywood.
Oh, wow.
For those of you not in the know, the way the film studio system used to work in the golden age of Hollywood is that movie studios would sign actors on for a film contract for a number of films, and they would be locked in for that period of time and then would be loaned out to other studios for a nominal fee. She was signed into a 10-picture deal with Universal Studios, Anthony, and beyond her film and TV career starting in 1963, she has a connection to one of our previous cast members, Anthony.
Oh, really?
Yes, indeed. In 1955, she starred in the stage musical Silk Stockings with old cast member Don Amici.
Oh, well, I'll be.
Yeah, she called him up on the Amici and asked if she can get a part.
Call back. It was a call back.
Beyond that and the Benny Hill Show, which it sounds like she just had like recurring bit parts as a pretty lady. She starred in a Clint Eastwood movie, a very early Clint Eastwood movie in 1968 called Coogan's Bluff, where Eastwood plays an Arizona sheriff who goes to the big city, this big city being New York City, to capture a fugitive to take him back for trial.
So Clint Eastwood playing Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, essentially. But it was like, I think it was right before the big kind of explosion with the spaghetti westerns with Sergio Leone. But I could
those early 70s? I could have sworn they were like mid to early 60s.
Yeah, I mean, well, the Coogan's Bluff was 1968, so if it's not before the spaghetti westerns, it's a little bit after.
Yeah,
I just don't know off the top of my head where the Dollars trilogy.
That's completely fine. We do some research, but not all.
And we tend to do it live on the air. Coogan's Bluff comes after the Dollars movies. So Eastwood's star is starting to do its meteoric rise. Her other claim to fame was one of those old disaster movies.
Of course.
She did the sequel to disaster movie Airport 1975.
Oh.
And that particular disaster movie starred old voice to the podcast, Charlton Heston.
Did you purposely search out a Chuck Heston role that she just so happened to coincide with?
No, I just like to make appearances. It's Charlton Heston.
Chuck Heston, everyone. Chuck Heston.
Thank you. I love to surprise Anthony with Charlton Heston. According, I don't know if you have any more specifics, Anthony.
I do.
You beat me to Amelia Earhart, but it seems like she was in various TV movies post.
She was, John.
Yeah, post Coogan's Bluff and Airport. Why don't you tell us about them, Anthony?
The ones I have, my good loyal listeners, hails from the old 1980s with movie Porky's, where she starred as Cherry Forever, and in the TV hit and acclaim Webster, where she played Catherine Calder Young. Oh boy, Papadopoulos. Hippopotamus.
Yeah. Fun fact: in Webster, she played opposite her real life husband, Alex Karras.
Oh, that is a fun fact.
Yes, that was her husband for about 30 years until his death in I believe the early to mid 90s. Webster, for those of you at home, was the role that made Emmanuel Lewis famous, and then that's all Hollywood ever gave him, unfortunately.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, John.
Yes, Anthony.
Could I please move on to the person, our victim this week, Richard Anderson playing character Bryce Chadwick.
By all means, Anthony, take the lead.
Now, Richard Anderson was a huge character actor with a lot of work. I tell you what, his IMDb page was so long.
How long was it?
Oh, let me tell you, it was so long. I thought my eyes were going to fall out of my head.
Let me tell you, I no respect.
Thank you.
As long as my arm.
My Rodney Dangerfield turned to John Madden somehow. Now, Richard Anderson, John, his notable vehicles. Yeah, pretty much. His notable vehicles were Forbidden Planet as Chief Quinn. The
opposite a person we're going to be talking about in a little bit, Leslie Nielsen.
Yes. And Forbidden Planet was a sci-fi movie of cult acclaim back in the mid-1950s, if I'm doing my math correctly.
Yes, it was 1956, Anthony. And would you like to talk about Forbidden Planet a little bit here since we brought it up? Or would you like to save it when we talk about the actual lead, one of the co-leads of that movie, Leslie Nielsen?
Let's put a pin in it, and I'll let you gorge out on the movie when we talk about the star of this episode, John.
Will do.
Now, John, Richard Anderson also starred in Zorro as Ricardo Delamo.
Now, for those of you at home, Richard Anderson is white.
Yes, of course.
Oh, that's Hollywood for you.
He was also in Bus Stop as D.A. Glenn Wagner, Perry Mason as Police Lieutenant Steve Drum.
He did 26 episodes of Perry Mason, Anthony.
I know.
That's incredible.
That is incredible.
But then again, Perry Mason ran for freaking ever.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was like, what? I didn't want to guess how many years that ran. It was on forever. And it was also, speaking of things that ran on forever, he was on the show Mannix, which is father of the co-star of this podcast, Mr. Soares' favorite show.
One of his favorite shows.
And John, he also starred in Tora, the Richard Fleshner directed movie.
Interesting. I have a couple other things that he was in, Anthony.
Would it be the $6 Million Man with Bionic Woman?
Going fast in slow motion, going fast. Yes, he played recurring character Oscar Goldman in The $6 Million Man and The Bionic Woman. He was one of the first actors to play the same character over two different shows, and it ended up being over two different networks, which was a rarity way back in the 70s. For those of you who are unaware of the backstory of the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman, the premises are similar to each other. Two injured people, a male and a female, in their respective shows, of course, are severely injured, and the U.S. government authorizes bioenhancements to turn these people into essentially cyborgs, and they do spy shit.
So, John, what you're saying is that it was a televised version of RoboCop.
Before RoboCop, yeah.
Yeah.
A couple other things that Richard Anderson was in. He was in some films up through the 50s. He was on an MGM film contract. He was also in Wagon Train.
Yes, he was.
A precursor to Star Trek, seeing as how Wagon Train was supposed to be an inspiration for Star Trek.
Because Star Trek, John, as I talked about in episode 1 or 2, or one of our early episodes, was supposed to be called Wagon Train to the Stars.
Thank God they didn't go that way. He was also in The Untouchables. The Rifleman, The Virginian. He had guest spots in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., I Spy, The Fugitive, The Green Hornet, Mission Impossible, Bonanza, The Wild Wild West, Hawaii Five-0.
I missed the TV jingle.
They don't do it anymore. Now it's just like,
that's actually also accurate.
Yes, indeed. He was also in The Streets of San Francisco, Gunsmoke, Ironside, The Love Boat, Knight Rider, Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island,
with Ricardo Montalban,
future guest star on this podcast because we're going to summon him from the grave. We're going to have a seance and we're going to interview him. Richard Anderson also had parts on Dynasty and Murder
as Buck Falmount.
I'm sorry, say that again.
As Buck Falmount was his character on Dynasty.
I thought you did a swear for a second.
No,
and I was
John.
going to go, you nasty.
No, John, I want to keep the E off of this podcast.
That is true. But then again, I can also just mark it, either way.
Fair enough.
I am a little suspect.
Jesus, what's going on?
I understand your confusion, though.
Oh, God. Good callback.
That's all I have for Mr. Richard Anderson, Anthony. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, John, I think it's time we move to the star of this episode,
Leslie Nielsen
as Peter Hamilton.
That is right. I almost did my Tonight Show entrance for him, but I don't have an Ed McMahon, and I don't want to step on your toes because Ed's your thing.
Yeah, well, I have a very late in his life Ed McMahon dying.
Ed, would you like to talk about Leslie Nielsen?
Carson, let me tell you. He starred a plethora of TV movies back in 1950. Switching back to Antonicus here. Notable works, John.
Yes, indeed.
Was The New Breed as Lieutenant Price Adams, Route 66, Kojak. The original Kojak.
The original Kojak. Was it in the 70s, you mean? Or is there one in the 60s?
No, the one in the 70s, the original Kojak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because they did a revamp with Ving Rhames in the mid-2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Early 2000s, mid-2000s, something along there.
Yeah, and then they still asked Who Loved You, Babe.
Speaking of love, John, he was also had some guest starring roles in The Love Boat, Fantasy Island, and my personal favorite, starred in the role Airplane as Dr. Romack.
His defining career role, because up to this point, he was known primarily as a serious actor. Airplane was one of those instances where he played against type. And it was part of the conceit of Airplane by the Zucker brothers and their co-partner, since it's the two Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams. So it's Zucker, Abrams, and Zucker who created Airplane and the subsequent movies that followed that.
Such as the Naked Gun series, where he played Frank Drebin.
Which is a film spinoff of a 6-episode TV series that the Zucker brothers and Abrams did with Leslie Nielsen as Frank Drebin, which he won an Emmy for Best Actor.
Ooh.
Yes. So he was known primarily as a serious actor, but when Airplane came around, part of the conceit of Airplane was that everybody was known for serious actors for playing serious roles, I should say, and were playing against type and playing it deadpan. So the comedy they were playing the situation deathly serious, which made it even funnier.
Absolutely.
Which led to the most famous line, surely you must be serious. Surely you can't be serious. I am serious.
And don't call me Shirley.
There you go.
Now, John, he also starred in a beautiful 1990s role in the movie Surf Ninjas, John.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
No, but I understand your confusion, because this was the 90s, which was a lawless society and land where they could just have extreme movies, and this was one of those. Now, Surf Ninjas, John, I know you want to know a little bit about it, and loyal listeners at home, I think you want to know about this as well. It starred Rob Schneider, and it's two boys learning from a mysterious warrior that they are the heirs to the throne of Patusan, and they set out to overthrow the current monarchy in extreme, gnarly, groovy ways, man.
All right, please tell me you're just reading from the plot description.
I was, except for the groovy, gnarly. I am
okay. On that. I expected a little bit more of a shaggy read of it, but I'll allow it.
Like zoinks, John! You just gotta love the 90s.
I mean, it did give us Dracula Dead, and loving it!
As well as Spy Hard as Agent WD-40, Dick Steele.
WD-40.
I know, right?
I wasn't expecting that. I'm sorry.
Gets him every time. Oh. Speaking of things that got me every time, John, was his portrayal of Mr. Magoo in the mid-90s movie, Mr. Magoo.
That is correct. I forgot he did that. He also did a number of TV roles before Airplane, Anthony.
That is true. Sorry, I kind of stomped all over that, John.
No, it's fine. Before he did any of the comedy roles, because those came in the 80s, up through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, he was doing some fairly serious stuff, or at least traditional stuff. He did various TV shows throughout the 50s, none of which I really recognized. His first big hit, though, was Forbidden Planet, like we mentioned when we were talking about Richard Anderson. Forbidden Planet is a science fiction film that is supposedly a adaptation of one of Shakespeare's final plays, The Tempest. And to quote Leslie Nielsen, he said, supposedly a science fiction version of Shakespeare's The Tempest. It was all about the id or something like that. Who knows? The Trekkies today regard it as the forerunner of Star Trek. I just had to wear a tight uniform and make eyes at Anne Francis. I was pretty thin back then. That's the wonders of Leslie Nielsen. Forbidden Planet skyrocketed his career, and that led to appearances in Rawhide, The Untouchables, Alfred Hitchcock's Presents, and the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, episodes of The Fugitive, Wagon Train again, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, parts in The Wild Wild West, Bonanza, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., Hawaii Five-0, MASH, and Kung Fu, among others. Later on in his career, outside of the Zucker movies, he did episodes of The Golden Girls and Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah. So what we're trying to say...
Old actors end up.
Yeah. And again, and his career, John, which is the part that amazes me, taking on a more serious note, is his career spanned all the way to like the early to mid 2000s in like the Scary Movie franchise, Scary Movie 3 and 4, where he played the president or something, if I remember correctly. Those spoof movies.
Absolutely. And to be honest, without what he did, because Airplane is supposed to be a parody of the disaster movies that our star like Susan Grant starred in. So it makes, and Scary Movie is, for all intents and purposes, a parody of Scary Movies. So without Airplane, you don't get those movies. Exactly. So I'm glad that they at least respect his legacy like that.
Now, John, as we say goodbye to our star of this episode of Columbo, we also have to say hello to Jessie Royce Landis as Mrs. Chadwick.
Now, Miss Landis has a very small part in this episode, but she still is a fairly substantial in relation to our lead, Susan Grant's character. And Landis has her own interesting career. She was doing TV and film stuff starting in 1930, and she worked with Hitchcock a bit on two particular films. She worked with him in 1955 on To Catch a Thief with Cary Grant. She played the character Jessie Stevens, and she also was in North by Northwest in 1959.
Why, yes, she was, John. She was also starred in the movie Mr. Belvedere Goes to College as Mrs. Chase.
Belvedere.
Mr. Belvedere.
Yes. Mr. Belvedere.
And worked all the way to the year 1971 with this episode, John, and loyal listeners listening at home, being her last act before she passed away.
Indeed. Prior to Columbo, she had parts in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and on Ironside. She also won an award for Best Performance in a stage play called Larger Than Life in 1950.
John, is that why she was larger than life?
Well, all you people, can't you see, can't you see?
How your love, loyal listeners, is affecting me personally.
I don't know the lyrics to the rest of this song, but you make me larger than life.
Oh, what? Now, John.
I love you, buddy.
I love you too, buddy. And we love you, loyal listeners, and hope you're still sticking with us while we tell you that good old Mr. Steve Bochko is back writing this episode of Columbo, which was also directed by Norman Lloyd, with Billy Goldenberg doing our score once again.
Good to see Bochko and Goldenberg back. Now, Norman Lloyd, this is his only episode of Columbo that he directed, which is honestly unfortunate because he does a fantastic job this week.
All but like one scene, which I'll talk about later in this podcast.
Do you know he's still alive?
No way.
He's 105 years old, Anthony.
Oh my God.
He was born in 1914, Anthony.
Oh my God. Oh, kudos to him, man.
Now, Norman Lloyd is best known as a producer-director. He was primarily a producer-director on Hitchcock work. He was a producer and director of episodes for Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. As an actor, he was best known for appearances in Murder, She Wrote, 2 Hitchcock movies in 1942, Saboteur, where he played a Nazi spy, and 1945, the movie Spellbound. He also had a part in the Robin Williams movie, Dead Poets Society, as Mr. Nolan.
Ooh.
And primarily on TV, he was known for his role in the medical drama Saint Elsewhere as Dr. Aushlander.
Oh, I'll be...
Yeah, his final role was in 2015 in the Judd Apatow, Amy Schumer starring flick Trainwreck.
Which was a train wreck of a movie.
I have no comment because I have not seen that movie.
Neither have I, but I just wanted to make the easy grab joke.
That is fair. We won't really comment on Billy Goldenberg's record since we've already talked about that before, but we will still be going into the intricacies of his score because he does a damn fine job this week, in my opinion. Same goes for Stephen Bochco's return. You can listen back to Murder by the Book for a little bit more background on Stephen Bochco. But this week, Anthony, Stephen Bochco isn't flying solo. He wrote his teleplay on a story by a guy named Barney Slate.
Oh, John, why don't you tell us a little bit about Mr. Barney Slate?
Well, I would understand your confusion if you thought he was a Flintstones character, but... Hey, Fred! Hey, Fred! I wrote a TV show, Fred!
Barney, stop with this meandering. Let's get to the episode.
Okay, Fred. So, Barney Slate, while he did not write a proper episode of Columbo, he just contributed to the story. He wrote for Gilligan's Island, Mission Impossible, Lost in Space, which I know is a favorite of your wife.
Danger, Will Robinson, danger.
Danger, Will Robinson, danger, danger. He also wrote for Bonanza, The Wild Wild West, and Chips. Now, one last bit of trivia that I have before we can get into our episode discussion proper. Anthony, we have another dead weight on our hands. And by that, I mean we had some more shenanigans with Peter Falk in the studio.
Really?
Yeah. According to the Columbo file, and while we don't have as much reporting on this instance that we do for the instance with Dead Weight, Eddie Albert, and Suzanne Plachette, apparently this episode was beset with difficulties between Peter Falk and the studio, Universal. It led to walkouts and a delayed film schedule. It didn't cause any bad blood between anybody cast-wise. So nothing with Susan Clark, nothing with Leslie Nielsen, which is important because Leslie Nielsen does come back for another episode later on.
But I will say, without going into the other episode, this is my favorite appearance of him.
I'm inclined to agree because my memory of his subsequent episode is that it gets complicated.
Yeah, anyway, we'll go into that when we go into that.
Well, that's still a long ways away, and we will definitely give that episode its due justice when the time comes. Funny story about what this might have almost led to, according to the Columbo file. The studio had a solution to deal with the ongoing issues that they had with Peter Falk. At the time, Universal came up with the idea of bookending each season of Columbo with Peter Falk. And then in between, so episode 1 would be Peter Falk, and say we have 7 episodes in a season. So episode 1, Peter Falk, episode 7 is Peter Falk, and in between, Columbo will be played by 4 to 5 different actors.
That's an interesting take.
I am in agreement with the Columbo file. I am glad that they didn't go that way.
I am totally glad they didn't do it, but that would be an interesting take to do something along the lines of like today's society if this were to be remade.
Yeah, because everyone has been tossing out Mark Ruffalo and Natasha Lyonne as a possible new person to take on the trench coat, as you will. So, and part of me thinks there are a couple ways you could do that. You could make them siblings, and then they just switch back and forth, or you just kind of follow the lead that Peter Falk did, and you don't really get much of their background. You kind of get little glimpses, but you're not 100% sure. So they're both Columbo.
Exactly.
You don't know if they are connected or if they ever interact with each other. You just get different episodes with them.
Yeah, you just make one. And again, there's rarely any times that even LA is mentioned in the Columbo series, right? That he's West Coast homicide detective. So you could just say that they're homicide detective, and that can make it work.
I mean, maybe I feel like LA is important to Columbo in some fashion. You know, I don't to a limited extent.
Is it though? Like besides like some of the episodes with like the beach, I mean, you could have big personalities just about anywhere and have them be guest villains.
I mean, it's tricky to say. I mean, we're not professionals. I mean, we're certainly trying to be. I'll say that much. But it would take a little bit of experimentation. Hopefully one day we see something new with Columbo. I would be fine with either Ruffalo or Leone, more Leone than anything. But, I mean, I think that there's a complicated rights issue that's preventing any kind of remake from moving forward right now. But that's a later discussion that we need to do more research on.
Absolutely. But one thing that we don't need to do any research on, John, is this episode's description given to us by the DVD preamble before you hit play, which is 2 siblings struggle for control of a family-owned corporation in this fan favorite.
Well, speaking of fan favorites, let's fan ourselves with this discussion of Act 1.
So Act 1, John, and loyal listeners listening at home, opens with Beth, Susan Clark, sneaking into a dark room and swapping keys?
Yes, that is correct. And if I may say, I love the opening of this episode with the sky view of the city and Goldenberg's music.
Oh, gorgeous.
It's like this like flighty like flutes, and it's just fantastic. It's a fantastic like tone setting opening. You get to see, granted it's not the highest quality, but you get to see the LA from the sky. It looks great.
Oh, beautiful. But where's all the traffic, John?
Ain't there yet. Or it's out in Disneyland. So like you said, Anthony, we zoom in onto a mansion and a sleeping man in a bed, to which a woman enters in and takes a key off of the key ring. I will admit, it is a little confusing because it does look like she's leaving a key, but you can see the key in her hand later on. Something I'd like to note is that she is clearly a young woman, but she dresses like she's 55.
Yeah, with that nightie she was wearing with the sleeves and something like your old grandma would wear, essentially.
Yeah, it's like a full collar. It's covering her chest and neck.
But what it also does, John, it also starts to set a little bit of her character right from the get-go, at least before her metamorphosis, as we'll go into as the episode progresses. But it kind of mainstays that she is this very timid, conservative young lady, who has been under the thumb, which we'll find out, of her father and then her older brother. At least I'm assuming older brother. I can't quite remember.
There's some great, editing work here, because we transition from night to day at a breakfast in the garden, because we're on a pretty substantial estate. The butler is, serving breakfast to the young woman that we saw.
Now, John, I want to have this discussion here.
Yes.
And we've talked about this in previous episodes. We've discussed how a lot of Columbo is essentially white-based, right? Like, all the characters you see are Caucasian.
Yes.
There are very rarely any people of color in this series, and we have already likened it to just that's how Hollywood was at the time, and we talked about that. But again, I just have to point out that Charles the butler is black. Hey, you'll find out later, another household servant is black. Yes. And so we see very little of people of color as far as them being represented in Columbo and other periods of this time in as far as TV and cinema. And when we do see people of color, John, it just so happens they have to be in servitory roles.
Yeah. I agree. That tends to be the case, especially with considering the fact that more often than not, Columbo is dealing with the crimes of the upper crust of society, which I believe is probably done on purpose by the show creators Levinson and Link. It is meant to cut a little bit more at, high society.
Yeah, it's meant to punch up, essentially.
Yeah. At the end of the day, as much as people like the Chadwicks, your Zuckerbergs, your Bezoses, to bring in some more modern references, at the end of the day, everybody poops. And everybody has to, eat and do their laundry. And that's something that I think those type of people tend to forget until they resort to those baser needs, which I think is what Beth is dealing with. She is dealing with the need to access the things that have been denied her, the baser things that have been denied her, which we learn at this scene of this breakfast. Her brother comes out, and we learn his name is Bryce. We learn her name is Beth. And he says that she's sulking over an argument. Yeah.
Essentially, the argument consisting of Bryce telling Beth that her taste in men is garbage. Like,
and
like
and that she
slaps her in
dating.
The face of it, John. Just, whap! Hey, you suck. Your taste in men suck. You garbage.
You garbage, you got to deal with it. His reasoning for it is that he doesn't want her involved with an employee. We learned that the Chadwicks are responsible for a big advertising firm, and the person that she is seeing is an employee there. And he is saying all of this ostensibly because he wants to protect her. He calls her paramour, for lack of a better term and a more modern term, he calls him a gold digger.
Yeah.
And he ain't messing with no broke.
No, he is not, John. And this is where, again, before I go into the ultimatum he gives, I like to say the use of exposition normally can be dull. Normally it can just be like, okay, this is exposition. But this particular scene and the uses of exposition was very well done. And again, it could just be a credit to the writing. It could be a credit to all the actors involved. But just overall, the performance of this exposition, giving it to you, and, discussing the ultimatum that he gives Peter Hamilton, her paramour, of either he leaves Beth or he's out of the company.
Yeah, which we learned that he has sent to Peter Hamilton in a letter. We have not met Peter yet, but that is something we know is going to cause some friction sooner rather than later. And if we are to look at what Beth has done with these keys, we don't exactly know what she's done with the keys quite yet. We can assume that some friction is already happening.
John, before we move a little further off this, I also want to talk about the way this was shot as far as giving you a better insight of Beth being portrayed as immature.
Yes.
Her nonverbals are excellent in that she's biting her nails. She's portraying this kind of like she's rebelling against an old father and her being a teenager. Which she's not a teenager, John. I would guess she's in her early to mid 20s at this point, maybe even pushing her 30s, whereas her brother...
Honestly, I would say she's probably closer to her 30s at this point.
Yeah. And her brother's around the same age, but he's still acting like he's like 70 or 60, like her father.
Maybe. I mean, that's one of the downsides of some older television is that you don't really get the specifics about age in a certain regard. I think in this case, I think it is safe to say that Beth Chadwick is definitely younger. I would probably say she's, if she's not in her 30s, she's about to enter her 30s. That's my perspective.
But again, with that being said, though, John, just the use of her nonverbals portraying this immature person was really well done by her.
She's stunted, in my opinion. She is stunted personal and emotional growth. She's not somebody who would be whatever age she is, having gone to school and college and dealt with a couple bad relationships with but either both romantic and platonic. She's been protected for whatever reason, and it is, I think you can give Bryce some credit. He wants to protect his sister, but I think there's more motive there than just, I want to protect her sister because that's what I should do. It's more about the reputation of the family and the company.
Yeah, I said this is not truly an act of altruism at all.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
No. And that has caused friction, to which we learn that the servants, Charles and others included, are going to have the night off.
After she asks Charles if he's going to be having the night off.
Which goes to your earlier comment about good exposition, because now we learn, she's going to be alone. And one comment I'd like to make is that I feel like we've gone back to the Spielberg approach in this episode where the exteriors match the interiors.
Yes.
I think there are a couple instances where it is probably more likely a set, like some of the department stores that we go to later in the episode where Columbo has conversations with Beth. I feel like those are more sets, but this house feels very believable as its own unit, and it feels like it's a real place.
Oh, 100%. I could totally believe that this wasn't like three different sets all spliced together. I felt like it was one moving shot of going from an exterior of a house and then walking right through the front door of the same plot of land.
And I feel that goes to the sensibilities of Bochko and Norman Lloyd, especially considering Norman Lloyd's background with Hitchcock, who was all about maintaining that kind of realistic approach on how at least film should feel. And I think that kind of bled into the TV side of it. We move on to meeting Peter Hamilton, played by the great Leslie Nielsen. And for those of you who had not seen Leslie Nielsen outside of the pure comedy stuff he does, this, upon my first watch, was a complete whiplash for me.
But he still had his silver gray hair, John. That's the thing. Did he ever have any other color of hair?
He does in Forbidden Planet. So about 56, he has brown hair, and then at some point, the white hair shows up forever.
But man, is he a silver fox.
He is incredibly charming.
Now, John, I know that you're not a fan of lapels on men's suits. I know this. We have gone in great length, off air, on air, about how you hate lapels. But
no. I don't, for the record, I don't hate lapels. I just hate huge lapels. 70s style, airplane runway sized lapels. You need to have like a very moderate sized lapel. Otherwise, you're just going to be flapping in the breeze.
And speaking of airplane and lapels, John, Leslie Nielsen's lapels on his suit, super smart, brilliant.
I will say this. He has very, very clean suits. 3 buttons is a little pushing it for me, but...
I mean, from all the suits we've seen, and we laugh at style of the 70s, we laugh about ruffled tuxedos, but this suit you can bring into 2020 and still look just fabulous.
I will say this. I think he wears a double-breasted jacket at one point later on in the act, and personally, I hate double-breasted jackets.
I would say, yes, that is also your arch nemesis for some odd reason.
Because it just makes everybody look bloated. That's it. It's just like nobody looks good in a double-breasted jacket.
Oh, Humphrey Bogart.
He's a stick, though.
John, you said nobody looks good in it, and I gave you evidence that porn's contrary.
One.
That's all you need to defeat your thesis of... Okay, anyway, we're getting way off topic here. I'm sorry.
Landing the plane.
We're going to land the plane.
So we learned that Peter Hamilton is an attorney working for the Chadwick firm. He is currently in Atlanta on a business trip, and he's very charming over the phone with Beth.
Charming.
So charming. It sounds like he's going to be coming back to Los Angeles soon, which panics Beth a little bit because it's all part of her plan. She needs to have the plan executed without a hitch, and that means nobody outside of it needs to be there.
Because she's planning for murder.
But she changes his mind. He says he's going to come back the following day. And there's a great moment between the two of them, and where, she asks him, "You do love me, right?" And he just deadpans, "No, I hate you with a passion."
Which is a great precursor into how he delivers such great deadpan comedy in Airplane and other later comedic
it's just effortless, but so good.
And that's the thing, too. I couldn't even tell where his acting stopped and where it started in that scene, right? Because it's just like, it's Leslie Nielsen having a phone conversation.
Yeah, but it definitely feels like he is playing a actual person. And it's just the hindsight of us dealing with the legend that is Leslie Nielsen versus the actor who was Leslie Nielsen playing a guy. So following that phone call with Peter, we go to the murder setup, as you will,
where Beth is preparing for such murder by leaving the side door open, locking the front door, and changing a light bulb or replacing a light bulb. That was
I think she put in a dud bulb so that the front porch light would not come on, because the plan is, at least, and we get like this flashback or this flash forward
It's a weird scene, and we'll touch on that. But John, the one thing that disturbed me the most was that she puts the gun that she's going to shoot her brother with in her lap and eats chocolates in bed when everything's set up. Yeah. What is going on there?
So, honestly, it feels like it's reminding me a little bit of somebody who's just trying to take her freedom and enjoying it for the first time. Okay. That's what it felt like.
Well, you're saying that her life is like a box of chocolates.
I mean, yes and no. I'll give you that one. This whole sequence kind of, we follow her from the front porch with the light to going to her room and setting up the side door so that her brother would come in, to her letting her hair down and getting undressed. And I bring up the hair down specifically because it reminded me of something I read in regard to Loki in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Interesting.
So there's a thing about Loki and his hair. When you see Loki in the first Thor movie, he has very short hair. And take this with a grain of salt. It's from the internet, so I don't know how accurate it is. But apparently, short hair in Viking culture was a symbol of servitude and slavery. So in the first Thor movie, his hair is that short because he's essentially meant to be a slave, because he's a captive child of a rival kingdom, the Frost Giants, right?
Right.
When we see Loki again in Avengers, his hair is longer. And as we see Loki throughout the Marvel movies, his hair is long, a little bit more uncontrolled. And it's supposed to show that he has his freedom again.
John, is that he let his hair down.
Yes, indeed. So my thought is that what Beth does here with her hair, and we can bring it up again when she does something significant to her hair, but every time she's talking to Bryce, her hair is either pinned back or pinned up. And when she's setting herself up to commit her crime, she's letting it loose. She's trying to gain her freedom back. That's what I'm saying. So you can feel a little bit of sympathy for her, because she's never been allowed to make her own choices, live her own life, but she's also a rich asshole.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, John, we have one of the trippiest future dream sequences.
I call it the diddly-doo moment.
I was thinking more so, oh, dream weaver, I believe you can make that.
I don't know the lyrics.
And it was just like this weird, like, ooh, and we see Bryce coming to the front door, seeing it locked.
So what this whole sequence is Beth running through her mind what she has planned and is expecting to happen. So because she sets out the light, she sets out the front light, she takes away his house key. It will force him to go around the house to her room. She will set the burglar alarm on. So when he opens the door, it sets off, and she shoots him and is setting up for a fake burglary. She's groggy from sleeping pills. She just hears the alarm, grabs the gun, shoots. But that's not what happens. Anthony, what actually happens?
What ends up happening is that Leslie Nielsen comes home, reads this letter that Bryce sent.
Yes.
Gets all just anger.
Leslie smash.
Exactly. Drives in his beautiful 1970s muscle car. Comes to the front gate. As that's happening, we see Beth hearing that Bryce is home. She is preparing with gun drawn at the side door. And then Bryce enters through her bedroom door.
Turns out there's a spare key.
And she flips her stuff, John. Ooh, almost lost the E. She flips her stuff and goes, oh, there's a spare?
Yeah, for all of her planning, I can't believe she did not consider there may have been a spare key. So we learned from Bryce that he had kept a spare key. And he's very confused as to what Beth is doing. And then she shoots him in a panic.
And as she shoots him, then she remembers, oh, crap, this goes against my plan. So then she hits the burglar alarm after shooting, drags his body to where it's supposed to be. As the alarm goes off, that's when Peter Hamilton hears from the front gate.
That's not 100% accurate. He hears the gunshots first.
That is true.
And then runs as the burglar alarm goes off. This is the crux of the problem, and we can explain that as Columbo investigates later on. But she is panicking. She is trying to get her dream plan back into exact formation. So she, like you said, Anthony, she's trying to set up her brother's body into where it would be had everything gone the way it went. She takes his keys, is trying to hide them. And I will say that Susan Grant's performance here is spectacular.
I forgot that she was an actress portraying this. You know what I mean? It just felt so real. Her panic.
It was like that one lady in Dead Weight.
Yeah, pretty much. Just her mania, just going and having to set all this up to where Peter Hamilton finally enters the house, and she goes, "Oh God, my shot, Bryce!"
Well, yeah, partly yes, but she wasn't expecting him to be there, and the ringing of the doorbell completely throws her off guard because she thinks she's just going to be by herself for the longest time.
Yeah, and this is when, remember I talked about a few instances where the directing was odd. This is one of them where the doorbell rings and it does this weird Scooby-Doo extreme close-up zoom, like, of the doorbell ringing.
Yeah, I agree and I disagree about this sequence. I do like the fact that there was a lot of cut back and forth before she lets Peter in. You know, it's the music works really well in relation to those quick cuts between, you know, Bryce trying to figure out what's going on, Peter on his way trying to get in, Beth getting ready to exact her revenge, or however you want to phrase it. I will also say that Leslie Nielsen is great in this scene as well, because
he really is. When
he charges into action, it's a great run. But if you look at his face, he is fraught with emotion, which I really appreciated. And again, the cutting back and forth really hypes up the fact that he is panicking, Beth is panicking, or later panicking, at first excited. So she moves all of this stuff. You know, the briefcase is used to break open the door to her bedroom from the yard. She uses Peter's entrance to hide the keys in the bushes, and takes the opportunity to hide the spare key so that she can get rid of it later, at which point she asks Peter to check on Bryce after saying, I shot Bryce.
Yep, and then just in one of the best moments of acting, and we already highlighted how great Leslie Nielsen is in general, but he comes back from the room after checking on Bryce, and it's just has this expression of just such sullen sorrow as he slowly walking to Beth, and delivers the line, John.
He's dead, Jim. Wait, crap, wrong show.
Wrong show. That's Wagon Train to the Stars. He delivers the line, he's dead. Beth, I'm so sorry.
At which point, I think we can say it's curtains for Act 1. And we can move on to the investigation in Act 2.
And now, loyal listeners, for a wonderfully amazing blooper. Please enjoy.
It's Wagon Train to the Stars.
I might leave this to it.
Please do. This is exciting.
So, John, Act 2. Columbo and the police show up to the murder scene.
Anthony, I gotta say, I love this crane shot, just like overlooking the driveway. And, because we open on the coroner's van and we pull out to see all the police cars. It's a great kind of, tone setting for me, in my opinion. I hope I'm using the right terminology. And again, it feels like this is a proper house. It's not a set. And we see Columbo just reading the newspaper.
Yeah, just reading a newspaper. And one of the, the extras who was playing a cop goes, you reading the news? You catching up on your news, Columbo? And just walks off scene, never to be seen or heard of.
Yeah, but Columbo says it's not mine.
Yeah, which is interesting. He's like, it's not mine.
So it's not mine. I don't know what this is. I'm trying to figure out why this newspaper is here. So we'll get back to the newspaper later, but it's something that's bothering him. So Columbo goes into the living room where Beth is being interrogated by two other detectives. We learned that the key to the house would have turned off the alarm. Everyone's trying to figure out, why would Bryce go in through that way if he didn't have a key? She's trying to sell that she shot him while being under the influence of sleeping pills. Yes. She hadn't left all day, which Columbo notes upon, because that means she didn't get a newspaper.
Right.
And Peter, they asked Peter, well, what are you doing here? Because it's suspicious, because considering the fact that he came in out of nowhere, even though he was on a flight. Why is he there? He explains he got frustrated and wanted to have it out with Bryce following the letter. And Columbo asks Peter, "Is this your newspaper?" To which Peter says, "No, it's not his." So we still don't know who this newspaper belongs to.
And again, it's portrayed as just this. That's just Columbo being all quirky.
But at this point, we know better. So another police extra finds the keys in the bush and mentions that because the light's out, it's hard to find them. So everyone starts making the assumption that because the light was out, he dropped his keys. He couldn't find his keys because the light was out, so he went around to where he knew somebody was. Now, I kind of appreciate this whole scene. Anthony, you want to know why I appreciate this scene?
Why, John? Because
I appreciate the fact that Beth's bubble is burst. If we go back to the diddly-doot moment, her flash forward on how the murder was supposed to occur, there was a moment where she had, there was some narration of her talking to some imaginary policemen where they were in complete agreement. It's, it's an accident. It's not going to be a problem, blah, blah, blah. And then reality hits and she's given, the 9th degree. So it's not as easy as she thought, which I appreciate. And it also goes to what, this character is dealing with, which is the difficulties of reality.
Yes. 100% agree, John. And that's a great, great topic you brought up. Now, John, one thing I want to mention.
Yes.
Is that we already talked about Columbo in the newspaper and how that he's being quirky.
Yes.
But essentially, Peter at this point tells the police, hey, you guys she needs her rest. You guys have asked her the same questions. But Columbo walks up. He's the last one to leave, of course. Walks up to the both of them, and it's just like, okay. So asks about the newspaper again, to which she's like, you've never heard of drive-up delivery service before?
No, that is a later conversation.
You're right. I messed up. Sorry, I'm just scrolling ahead.
So here he's asking about the servants.
That's right. Sorry, I got those two scenes mixed up. Darn it.
Yeah, no worries. I completely understand because they do happen pretty quickly in relation to each other. So, do you think he's onto her at this point? Because I thought he was.
Oh yeah, especially the line that he delivers where he says, "Oh, I take it the butler was off tonight, huh?" And then she answers yes, and he goes, "Oh, it's funny how that happens."
Yeah. Now I have a question regarding Peter. And this is a little bit more inside baseball to later on in the episode. Because, and this is also due in part to me having watched this episode a couple times. Do you feel that in this scene, there's a moment where Peter obviously doubts what Beth is saying, but is going along with her because he loves her?
I don't know if the doubt is placed yet. I think that comes into later. But I think that he does love her, and in doing so, trusts her word at face value.
At least at this point.
At this point, takes it at face value because what she's saying could make plausible sense. And being that when there's people closest to us, we always try to assume the best of them, even if they do something a little sketchy.
Yeah, now that was my thought as well. That changes a little bit or more like a lot of it, as the episode goes on, but we'll get there when we get there.
Absolutely. And speaking of people who get here, John,
I set them up and you knock them down.
Absolutely. The scene changes to the next day. Columbo on a ladder, looking at a light bulb on the front porch where a taxi pulls into the driveway.
And we meet the matriarch of this family, Mrs. Chadwick. We don't get her first name. And she mistakes Columbo for the help.
Oh, it was hilarious. She starts barking at Columbo. Hey, you! Get my bags and pay the driver as she storms into the house.
And while Columbo's being barked at by her little Selkie, or whatever the hell that dog is called. Now,
John, we've talked about in Columbo episodes past where the humor feels forced. Like they write the humor in on purpose just to, they try to make a light of a situation. But this is an example of what that is not. Because this humor just played off the script perfectly. It hit perfectly 100%. Where he goes up to the cab driver and he goes, oh, does she have any luggage? The cab driver goes, oh, yeah, she's got some luggage. Opens up and bags practically fall out of the cab.
And this cabbie was just... He gave me some drunk wino vibes.
Oh, I wish I got the guy's name who played the cab driver because he was just his comedy was deadpan. His comedy was great. He tells Columbo the meter says $10.50. Columbo's like, I only have $11. You should keep the rest. Which the taxi driver,
a peach.
Yeah, the taxi driver looks at him and says, "Oh, you're such a peach."
Now, what I appreciate about Jessie Landis's performance here is that she does Blue Blood very well. She has that old, I do say, please pay the taxi driver.
Yes.
Like, Thurston Howell III kind of thing.
Yes, 100%.
Which apparently Jessie Landis was particularly known for and was commonly playing older than she was frequently. I also appreciate the fact that Columbo straight up says, yeah, I had to pay the guy $11, so can you reimburse me?
Oh, and she's like, I'll send you a check, whatever. But he really drives home the fact that he needs that $10 right now.
Yeah, and this comes after she doubts that he's even a cop.
Yes. So he shows her the badge, and then Beth comes into the room, and we see...
With her hair up, mind you.
With her hair up, dressed very conservatively, all in black. And then
subservient.
Exactly. And then we see, John, one heck of a slap.
That was I have in my notes, it's a meaty slap.
Oh, it's not even one of those like fake camera slaps. This is like, no, you're gonna take this slap, and this is gonna be a one take shot. So you better take it right.
Yeah. So Mrs. Chadwick slaps her daughter because she's pissed. She's pissed off her daughter murdered her only son.
And Beth the whole time is like, well, it was an accident, Mom. And she's like, I don't care. He was the only hope. He was the chosen one.
Yeah, we learned from Mrs. Chadwick that Bryce elevated the company far beyond anything his father did, who is the father who is deceased. And we also learned that Beth has a history of quote unquote troublemaking and bad emotionally based decisions that her father had to help her clean up, and then that duty fell to Bryce once their father passed away. So it sounds like Beth has never been allowed to try and fail at things, mostly because they don't want it to blow back on the family and the firm. Also, I want to note that Mrs. Chadwick has a cape, and it's kind of amazing.
She did, didn't she?
She did, and this is my official first time on the Columbo Files, and I'm going to make this a recurring thing every time I see a cape. Bring back capes. I want capes to be a regular thing in society again. Damn it.
Oh, gosh.
I want a cape. Don't judge me for it.
Oh, gosh, John. No, I'm 100% with you on that, buddy. One thing I was not on was after the slap, John, she sends Beth to go get, well, no, she doesn't get coffee, but Columbo hints at that he smelled coffee and would like some, so Beth subserviently goes and gets coffee, and that's when Columbo really gets the dirt from Mrs. Chadwick.
Yes, and we get all of the stuff about the family history with Beth and Bryce and their father and what Beth ultimately means to this family, which it doesn't sound like much. When she returns with the coffee, and also respect to Columbo for getting, just straight black. That's how a true gumshoe does it.
Exactly.
Columbo starts talking about his problems, like we've learned before. I got these problems. They bother me. I just can't let them go. It's the newspaper. And like you said, Anthony, earlier on, when you got your scenes mixed up.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about Columbo's problems with this newspaper?
So the problems Columbo has with this newspaper is that, again, it was the nightly press, so it was fresh off the presses, so that it could not have been delivered the morning of the murder or even the afternoon of. This was a first edition, which was a thing back in the day where newspapers...
Late edition. Right?
Late edition, excuse me.
Yeah.
Thank you. It was a late edition to which was a thing back when newspapers were actually a thing. And because of that, Bryce would have had to bring it in. And being as this newspaper was found in the foyer, it must have meant that Bryce didn't come through the side door. He had to have come in through the front door.
Which Beth has an answer for. She had an answer saying, oh, well, the paper was delivered to the home, which makes sense. But considering it's a late edition, that has to be something that's picked up. It can't be delivered. So Beth explains that she grabbed it in a state of shock and took it to the foyer, which Columbo says is acceptable enough. We know the lieutenant by now. So Columbo says that makes sense. I don't think he buys it.
Not at all. He's like, well, it's possible, but why wouldn't you bring in his briefcase as well?
And to which Mrs. Chadwick surprisingly defends her daughter.
Yeah, that's what I was surprised about too. I thought, if anything, she'd be on Columbo's side, seeing how she just smacked the taste right out of her daughter's mouth just not even 5 seconds ago.
Yeah, I attribute it to the consideration that she has for the reputation of the family and the firm. So at the end of the day, even though Columbo is essentially cross-examining here, Mrs. Chadwick has a duty to her family and to the firm to make sure that her daughter doesn't say anything that would then blow back on both.
That is a great point, John. Honestly, I didn't even consider that at all. I was just sitting there taking it at face value, thinking it was weird she was defending the person she smacked, but I didn't even consider the angle of protecting the brand, if you will.
Yeah, but there's a moment later on with her that kind of puts a hole in that, but we'll talk about it then and see what our feeling on Mrs. Chadwick is like at that particular scene. Once Columbo leaves, we go to a courthouse, though, Anthony.
Yes, we do, John. And apparently, it is a grand jury summoning?
No. Yes and no. From what I was able to gather based off of dialogue from later in the episode, this is an inquest.
An inquest. Okay.
So an inquest is a judicial hearing about establishing facts regarding a certain incident. So in most cases, it's a death. So I think it's typically about, accidental deaths. So like say, you shoot somebody accidentally because you thought somebody was trying to break into your house. It would establish the facts so that a jury can make a decision on whether or not this is an accident or not, and then it would go to an indictment stage, or the DA would get involved. I think in this case it is following the plan that Beth has, which is get this treated like an accident, and then everything goes away. Because this is not a formal trial. She is not up against a judge. She is not being formally charged by the state. This is just a judicial hearing to establish what happened and what her role in it was.
And essentially what it comes down to, John, is her role is that she did not have any malicious bone in her body when she shot her brother to death.
Yes, the jury rules that it is an accident. And I would like to note that her hair is up again, looking short. She's being subservient. My theory, gaining strength.
Okay, let's roll with it. And speaking of Beth, she is celebrating, which I found she... I don't know. I found it in ill taste if she's trying to play the part that she didn't shoot him on purpose. You'd think she'd be more somber.
Yeah.
He is like clicking her heels. Woo! I want to take the jury out on lunch.
I think that goes to the something we mentioned earlier about her not having the right amount of emotional growth. Because I think that a regular civilian, not somebody in Beth's circumstances, would be a lot more somber, like you said, Anthony. So, like, if a family member accidentally killed another family member because of a mistaken belief that a burglary was occurring, I would imagine that person would be devastated, even though, sure, I'm not going to be formally charged, but I've ruined, my family's life in a way. But, Beth is just, celebrating the fact that she is free. And I will mention this, and this is going to be a little, heavy-handed, but my God, Leslie Nielsen has got one hell of a head of hair.
Oh, right. And the suit, again, still a smart suit.
Still smart.
Suit. And yet he gets turned down to a lunch invitation by Beth.
Yes, she's going to run errands. She's got some plans, which is a good opportunity for Columbo, because Columbo asks, Peter to go to lunch with him. And why not? Because that Peugeot is just so charming.
Again, and so he asks Peter to go to lunch with them. Peter accepts. He's like, oh, what the heck? Why not? And again, he gives Columbo, when Columbo's asking this, kind of like this knowing look of, look, I know you're going to try to ask me some questions, but I like the cut of your jib, sir.
Yeah, that's what I really appreciated about these first scenes with Falk and Nielsen, is that they're having fun with each other. They're enjoying each other's company.
Oh, and it shows in the next scene when they're at like a drive-up lunch place, a la Sonic or something of the like.
And listener, I want to go there.
Right? It looks amazing. And they're sitting in this car. And again, there are a couple scenes in this episode, John, where they're both just together, both Leslie Nielsen and Peter Falk together on screen. And what I appreciate about this is they are allowed to chew the scenery and just go and be themselves as they're exchanging exposition and dialogue.
Yeah, it's a meaty conversation scene. It's a very lengthy scene. Columbo is, getting more information about what Peter and Beth's relationship is. We find out that they are kind of engaged. Like they plan to get married, but it doesn't sound like they are formally engaged.
Because Bryce was coming in the middle of that.
Yeah, and Bryce came in the middle more by that letter threatening Peter to back off or you're fired, which got Peter heated.
And then Peter goes to Columbo. He's like, okay, you're asking all the questions except the one you should be asking.
Yeah, and Peter as a lawyer is just cutting straight to the point.
Yeah, and Columbo's like, oh, no, I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think you had anything to do with it, which kind of bemuses Peter Hamilton, and which is why I just appreciate the acting of Leslie Nielsen, because he's just so bemusing. He's like, okay, you're a little weirdo, you're a little oddball, Columbo, but I like you.
Yes, I like it. And then he also asks him if Columbo thought that Peter was, a gold digger. Is he just trying to get at Beth because of the status of her family and the money that comes with it? Peter says he's not, but he is also glad that Bryce isn't around to keep Beth pinned down under his thumb.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
And it sounds like intimidating, which is also interesting that he allowed himself to say that being a lawyer.
Yeah, especially if he's thinking that Columbo might be considering that there's some kind of conspiracy to commit murder here.
Yeah. But again, it just shows to his honesty that he feels safe around Columbo to just kind of talk like a person and not talk like a cop to a lawyer.
Do you think that's why Columbo forgets to give the tray back?
Yeah. But what I also want to note, John, is that was a great scene. He forgets to give the tray back to the young lady, and he gets immediately red-faced, and it's almost as if like that wasn't written in the script. It's as if, Peter Falk actually forgot to give the tray back. But in this scene, John, what makes it so important is that this is when Columbo starts to really put the seed of doubt into Peter Hamilton's mind.
Yes.
About Beth.
Indeed. And more seeds are planted as we go to our next scene at Chadwick Manor, where Columbo is found by Charles the butler and an unnamed maid. And Columbo's investigating a brand new sports car, Anthony.
Oh, it was a brilliant sports car. And it was just delivered.
And Columbo's trying to find Beth, who is not here to deal with her fancy new car. Apparently she's living it up at a local salon, to which Columbo is going to visit. But he takes a little trip around the yard, Anthony. And we don't know exactly why, but we do see the Charles and his colleague have a oh crap moment on their face, where after Columbo decides to take a walk around the yard, and they immediately follow him.
Yep, because he's just conducting an experiment real quick.
Yes, just conducting an experiment. No need to worry. Also, I love the music when he's driving to the salon. I love it.
Great.
It's jaunty. It's exciting. It's he's on the prowl. He's on the hunt. It feels good. It's like, darn, I love Billy Goldenberg right now.
Exactly.
I love it. Now we're at a salon, Anthony, where Columbo has to reluctantly give up his cigar, and she's getting a haircut. And Columbo's interrogating her while she's getting a haircut. And he mentions that, it takes a couple weeks for the car to show up. That means you placed that order a while ago. And Columbo goes on to say, if she ordered that car so long ago, that means she knew she was going to be making a big, gigantic change like this in the near future.
Yep, absolutely.
How does Beth reply to that, Anthony? I'm curious.
I don't remember the exact wordage, but she kind of plays it off as like, well, so what?
She's very flippant about it, but it's not a very convincing flippant.
Exactly. And John, if you want to go back to your metaphor of hair, this is another instance where we talk about the hair coming down. Her haircut is finished. It's looking very marvelous. It's a haircut of her choice.
Exactly. And I will say it does make her look younger.
It very much does.
Yeah, and that's not, considering the very scantily clad look she gets later on in this episode.
But, John, before we get to that part, we have to go to the part where Columbo's asking to follow Beth home because he wants to show her something.
Yeah, he's got some experiments he's got to run by her. So he takes her around the yard like he did before he went to meet her at the salon. And on Thursdays, it sounds like yard work gets done, considering that there's dew and yard trimmings, and it's been a week since her brother was killed.
Yes.
You know, Columbo theorizes that, based off of what happened to him, you know, there should be grass on his shoes because of the wet grass and the trimmings. Columbo has it, but he looked at Bryce's shoes. Bryce did not have any kind of grass on his shoes, which Beth throws off as nothing.
Again, another flippant deflection.
Mm-hmm. Which she gets pretty chilly here, where it's just like, well, the carpet, he must have wiped it off on the carpet, and the carpet's been cleaned.
And the carpet's been cleaned already.
Mm-hmm. So Columbo has one more thing that he has to run by here. They go back to the front door, and he shows her a flower pot with the imprint of a spare key. And she's got another response for that.
Oh, my gosh. Now, that response is that, oh, yes, I made a spare key to the front door ages ago and then recently took it out because I was afraid that if a burglar could find it, he would use it and enter the house.
And Bryce didn't know about it. That's the important thing. He did not know about it. It was all Beth's idea. There was nothing for Bryce to use. Also, I want to see if you and I are thinking on similar wavelengths. I was getting some 1977 Carrie Fisher vibes off of Susan Grant in this scene, just because of the way she was inflecting her voice. It sounded like she was putting on some kind of an accent similar to what Carrie Fisher was doing in that first Star Wars movie.
Yeah, she was definitely putting on a kind of a front of like an aloof person of status, to which she is using this said tone to pretty much tell Columbo to go kick rocks. That at this point, I never want to see you again. You have no business with me. I have been found free of guilt of any shooting of my brother, so get out of here.
Yeah, she implies that. She says that later on, in which we will get to. Also, kind of a shame Carrie Fisher never had a part in Columbo. I think she would have killed it.
Agreed. Very much so.
Agreed. I want to see Carrie Fisher in all the things, and I miss Carrie. Moving on to I guess a date moment between Beth and Peter at a clothes store that has a bar and a pool table in it.
Oh, now, as a man who's been with my wife for many, many years now, this is something I dream of as she's doing her shopping and trying of clothes.
I want to know what kind of department store has a pool table and a bar just sitting around in it.
I don't know, man, but I am all for it. This should make a comeback. 2020, make this a comeback.
Or 2021, considering.
Considering, COVID. But yeah, this should make a comeback because I could spend hours playing pool, having a few cocktails as my lovely wife tries on many a clothes, as Beth does in this scene.
Yes.
And John, why don't you tell our loyal listeners the choice of attire she just so happens to choose and shows her boyfriend Peter?
Well, at one point, she makes at least one outfit change. At first, she changes from one, she's in like a very hip 70s style, 70s era clothes, which she's got a hair wrap on. And then she changes into a very, I'm going to say it's a sexy little number because it's honestly what she's going for. She's in like this two-piece purple outfit. It's a crop top, a lot of midriff.
Yeah.
So Peter and her are having a conversation about how she's changed, and he feels very unsure about what's going on with her because the outfit changes, the sudden purchases, the impulse buying, her responses to her brother's death and her mother's concerns. They all are throwing Peter off, and he's not sure if he's here for it.
Yeah, she is no longer the woman he fell in love with.
There's a sequence in the next act, and I think we can talk about it. I think this is a good transition to get into that because Peter's dealing with a lot more doubts, and that comes to a head in Act 3, unless you have anything else you want to add, Anthony.
No, John. I think now is the time for Act number 3. Act 3, John, starts at a boardroom meeting.
To which there is, to comment earlier, back to something you mentioned earlier, there is an African-American gentleman in this boardroom, Anthony.
And it's about goddamn time.
Yes, so he is not just a help. Unfortunately, he is just a background extra. I will say Beth's outfit here is super 70s and bonkers.
Oh, that hat, John. She's wearing like a felt hat that makes her look like a hippie train conductor.
I was going to say she looked like the Swedish chef from the Muppets.
No, don't throw that on the Swedish chef. That dude was the man.
Fair enough. Honestly, more than the hat, the jacket is what gets me because it has
the hat, John.
No. Okay, you got to bear with me. The jacket has shoulder pads that form the collar. The collar is shoulder pads, Anthony. I think that takes the cake.
No, John. She looks like a linebacker train conductor.
Oh, my God. Anyway, it is super loud. It's super purple. It's bad. It's 70s. It is like the 70s in an outfit. But that's not what the main point of this scene. Beth is taken over. She's taking lead of the company, taking her brother's position as president of the company based off some kind of experience. I don't know what, to be honest.
The only experience she quoted was that Bryce taught her everything she'd learned, and she was very inquisitive and asked him questions. And in a way, Bryce was grooming me for this position.
Which sounds like a load of hooey.
Yeah, which is an actual line she used, in which apparently everyone's like, no. And one of the brave souls on this boardroom meeting tries to throw doubt on her and say, what are you trying to say, Beth? We're completely fine. Then what happens to that poor boardroom member, John?
She threatens to fire him, really.
Oh, she smacks him down like her mother smacked her in the face just a few moments ago.
And this whole sequence is confusing because she starts talking about taking on new clientele, focusing on the company and selling their own product, which to this gentleman's credit, a marketing company is supposed to be selling marketing for other companies. What product are they selling?
Yes. Whereas she is thinking it's like some sort of fashion company that they have to put their own name out there, but I
think that it goes to the thing we've been talking about throughout this episode, is that Beth's expectations and what reality is are two completely different things. And while Beth can meet the situation for the most part, I think she is woefully underestimating what the reality of the situation is once she gets there. I don't think she can say Bryce groomed her as much as she wants. I don't buy it completely, considering how he treated her and how much he dealt with her with kid gloves. And you also get, to quote Peter, a little bit of nepotism because she promotes Peter to a big muckety-muck position. I don't have the position written down because it was
vice president of everything in this company, practically.
I guess it's just like, but my chief lover boy who gets to handle all the things because he's so big, smart, and intelligent.
And immediately, immediately she announces it, and Peter's just like super uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that's another great example of Leslie Nielsen's acting here. He is really thrown off by that and by her other announcement to the entire board and her mother that they are engaged.
But here's the thing, John. His acting just before they announced the engagement was great, and he was uncomfortable. And then she goes, oh, by the way, a bit of personal news. Peter and I are engaged, so congratulations. And people are going up and congratulating him, and he's like even just more uncomfortable. And he just, when people congratulate him, he snaps out of this uncomfortable feeling and goes, oh, yeah, I guess congratulations are in order.
Yeah, I had it in my notes that, he's clearly frustrated, but he's playing cool.
Right.
Throughout the whole, oh, I have a big fancy promotion that I wasn't really gunning for. Okay. Oh, she just announced we're engaged. I didn't have anything to say about that, which he then confronts her on.
Yeah. But not before our lovely Lieutenant Colombo comes into the office with a burnt-out bulb.
That is true, but that's following a conversation with Mrs. Chadwick, who is trying to figure out how is Beth qualified to lead like Bryce did. And she Beth really exerts some authority over her mother, which I will give her some respect for. But there's also a note about Landis's performance here, which I really liked. She had a sense of like sadness on her face when she left that office. What did you think she was feeling in that scene?
I think she saw the walls closing in and saw where her fate was going, which is why she gave that appearance that she did, and then gave Beth tells her, like, we'll deal with this later, Mom. We'll finish it up later. And no, doesn't even call her mom, calls her mother. We'll finish this up, mother, later. And her mother goes, well, as you wish, or something of that nature.
And that's the last time we see her.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if that's just a virtue of Landis passing away before she could film anything else. But
to be fair, I don't quite need her. You know what I mean?
No, at this point, no. The focus is more on how it relates to Peter and Beth and the increasing fractures in their relationship. I do feel that she was just sad that Beth is clearly drowning but doesn't know it.
Yeah.
In that, I think as frustrated as she is with her child, it's still her child. And
the only child she's got left.
Yeah, and it's probably another moment where she's missing her son and feeling that he would have been able to handle things, but now nothing can be handled because he's gone. It's just starting to spiral. But it's a brilliant, subtle piece of acting by Landis. And then Columbo shows up to do more subtle acting because he's got another problem. What's his problem, Anthony?
That the light bulb was changed, but it was also extremely clean.
Yeah, Columbo starts explaining it's like an outside light. It's going to get dirty because it's exposed to the elements. It's out. It's on, 8 to 10 hours a day. It's going to last about 2.5 months. But in that time, it's going to get dirty. And this one, it's pretty clean. And Beth says, yeah, it got cleaned. So the help didn't change out a broken bulb, huh? Makes no sense, right?
Yeah, exactly. But she instantly gets frustrated, deflects again, and tells him just to get out of there. Like I told you before, you need to stop dealing. You need to stop seeing me because this is ridiculous.
Yeah, she gives him an ultimatum, and she keeps her cool to an extent. So Columbo leaves, but not before he gives her the bulb back. And she's still calm. The moment Columbo leaves, she has a meltdown, Anthony.
She completely throws the light bulb to the other side of the room. It breaks. She is melting down, to which Peter goes, what is going on with you? Yeah,
and they are a great counterpoint to each other in this scene because she is all fire and he is all ice. And what I mean by that is that she is just buried in her frustration and her emotion, and Peter is trying to be clinical and very lawyerly about it and trying to figure out what the issue is, what the problem is, and how does he solve it. Because he sees the problem of the Beth that he knew is no longer the Beth that's in front of him.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And he doesn't know how to approach these changes and whether these changes mean anything at all. And he's also frustrated that he had no say in the fact that they were engaged.
And they have a to-do about it of, well, don't you want to get married? He's like, yeah, but I wanted to have a say, which I thought was a nice mirror that showing that was the way she was being treated by her father and then brother. And now she's being faced in a situation where she's treating somebody else like that.
Yeah, she just assumed what she wanted was what he wanted. And maybe that's the case, but based on this conversation, it seems that Peter at least wanted more of a say, a more equal partnership than what this new version of Beth was getting. And I think this kind of leads us to a talking point as to what about Beth was the thing he loved. Was it the fact that she was somebody who was under a family member's thumb, but trying to buck that thumb, and that's what attracted him? Or, was he just looking for somebody to rescue? What was his intent here?
See,
Anthony, what do you think?
It's hard to say, because in the earlier scene where he's with Colombo at that drive-up diner spot, he straight up told Colombo that he was going to leave the company. He was ready to just leave the company to stay with Beth, which, again, if we're thinking of Beth from the earlier term, she was more conservative. She was this delicate flower in a glass case, and the glass case being her father and her brother, the way that they put the walls up around her.
Yes.
So I think it was that attraction to this fragile creature that is unfortunately has been wronged, was the attraction there. And again, she was smart and funny within the realms of this glass case. And so I think he just fell in love with that particular version of her.
And then once that case shattered, he got something new, and it's not necessarily the thing he wanted.
Yeah, he got the thorns of the rose that was behind the glass.
Not just the pleasure of looking at it. From there, we go to him sulking at Peter sulking at a bar.
Yep, he tells the bartender, just keep him coming, essentially, indicating that he's been there a while and he plans on staying there a while, John.
Yes, indeed. But, oh, look! Somebody's there! It's Columbo!
Who is reading a paper with a cup of coffee, and Peter sees him across the room, shakes his head in like this affable way, and makes his way over to Lieutenant Colombo.
It's just like, what a coincidence, right? We find out that Columbo is reading the inquest transcript, particularly Peter's testimony about what he saw and heard that day.
Now, John, this upcoming scene that we're talking about is probably my favorite scene of this entire episode. And let me tell you why. Because Peter is sitting there after hearing that Columbo's reading the transcripts, and he's just laughingly like, you don't seriously think that Beth killed her brother out of cold blood. And then Columbo looks at him, sizes him up, and says, well, Mr. Hamilton, in fact, I do. And just stares at him. And he's searching for something within Peter. And Peter at first is kind of like, laughing, thinking he's joking. But then upon seeing Columbo give him that stare down of sizing him up, he starts getting defensive, saying, no, you can't, no way.
Absolutely. Yeah, he maintains that belief of that Beth is innocent. And then Columbo tells a story, as he's so wont to do, about a conversation he had with his wife, particularly about how, in some instances, he puts the cart before the horse. And that's the key.
Yes, it is, John.
So Columbo starts saying, there's something here that is proof that the cart was put before the horse, and it's in Peter's testimony, because what he said at the inquest doesn't necessarily match what he said the night of the shooting. And that's where we leave it for the conversation between the two of them, because then it goes to Beth being a very different kind of Beth in her bed again.
Yes.
It is a marked change from Beth as we knew her from the beginning of this episode. Gone is the matronly style nightgown. We now have a very revealing nightgown. And she's smoking. She's drinking in bed, something that we did not see her do before. So while she's working on her bed, having her nice smoke and drink, she hears somebody fumbling at the door, like per her murder plan. And she grabs her gun. And I got to say, Goldenberg's score here is phenomenal. Excellent. Great tension building. Arguably, I think this is where he's been his best.
This from this point to the end of the episode, absolutely. This is where he made his money.
I agree. Now, Columbo, she thinks it's Columbo at the door. And she is ready to shoot him. And she is just, I love her attitude, lounging on the bed, just waiting for Columbo to open the door.
Yeah, just very cavalier, like, come on in, Columbo, have a drink, come on in.
I got a present for you.
Yeah, exactly. But Columbo doesn't come through that door, John. Where does Columbo come in from?
Well, after the fumbling stops at the the yard door, Beth goes up to check what went on, and she turns around and there's Columbo, which we cut, and then there's a quick cut to Beth hallucinating her brother doing the same thing. A little bit of guilt there, possibly. I don't know. The short version is Columbo entered like Bryce did, and he reveals that Peter is going to testify that he heard that the cart was indeed before the horse, that he heard the gunshots before he even heard the alarm go off.
And he is nailing it to her with all the little facts, the newspaper, like you said, Peter's testimony, and what the fact that he followed up with the locksmith regarding the key made, and that it was actually Bryce who did it and not her.
The bulb.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when she knows she's been caught and turns the gun on Columbo. And John, we're talking about the score. We're talking about also the best de-escalation I've ever seen in any Hollywood cinema.
In any kind of police show interaction where there is a suspect that pulls a gun on a police officer. Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Beth is the first suspect in the show so far that threatens Columbo with physical violence.
100%. She threatens him, and John, you don't even see a speck of fear from Columbo. He sees the gun and says, "You don't want to do that, miss. There's police officers everywhere outside. It's not going to get you anywhere. And plus,
you're too classy of a woman."
And she smirks, she drops the gun, and he says, "Go get dressed, take all the time you need."
And that leads us to, I think, the best closing we've had in this show so far.
Yeah.
With Columbo leaning on the door frame to the yard, lighting up a cigar, and the camera pounds out, and there's no cops outside.
No, no cops.
He just kept his cool, kept his head on straight, got her to calm down, took control of the situation, got him the win.
Yep. Now, John, I have a few thoughts about that particular scene, but I'm going to save that for final thoughts.
In our segment, just called Just One More Thing.
Take it away, John.
Now, Anthony, it is time for Just One More Thing. Our thoughts, our final thoughts. Anthony, give me some final thoughts on Lady in Waiting.
John, my first final thought is that I just love the chemistry between Leslie Nielsen and Peter Falk. I mentioned it in the scene where they're sitting eating in the car and in the scene in the bar. And it's just the chemistry, the way they were able to chew the scenery, the way they were able to just be themselves in that moment and talk to each other. You instantly forget that this is a product of Hollywood. You think that this is just two regular people talking in certain places.
Anthony, I agree. And to be honest, I would expand it to the whole episode. I think that it's a credit to Barney Slate's story and Stephen Bochko's writing. And, Norman Lloyd's directing, because I think Norman Lloyd is, even though he does this one episode, he's up there with Spielberg. So, to be honest, I think this is arguably one of the better shot episodes. I think that the nature of how the characters interact with each other are incredibly realistic. Even with Beth, there's such interesting family dynamics between her and Bryce, her and her mother and Bryce together. Even though they don't share the scene together, there's a lot of implied stuff there. Her interactions, Beth's interactions with Columbo, fit the show's mold incredibly well. Where it is, she's charmed by him, but equally annoyed by him.
Yes.
Leslie Nielsen does really steal the show for the most part. But to be honest, I feel like Susan Grant takes it away from him a little bit because she does. I feel like she does such great physical acting.
Oh, I agree.
Between, the changes from her being the super conservative, high collar, high hair, daughter under the thumb to the liberated wild child. She sells it very incredibly well, and it's all very subtle. It doesn't feel too outlandish, and she sells panic and manic so incredibly well.
Oh, 100%, John. The way that, like, again, from the opening scene where she's planning on killing her brother, and where it just doesn't go to her plan, and there's just that one little grain of sand in her gears there, and she just falls apart and gets super manic and becomes super impulsive. And just excellent work. I agree that she definitely deserves her place as far as the top actors in this episode.
I honestly wish she comes back more, but unfortunately, we only get the one. But
John, that leads me to my next point.
Yes,
and that's just that final scene between her and Colombo. Again, I took this directly from Columbo File, those great folks over there, talking about Colombo and how he dealt with that. Yet he dodges death with guile and charm, finding a chink in Beth's armor in that warm human way that Peter Falk does so well. Take note, ABC.
Yeah.
Columbo does not need to do stupid stuff like putting his head in a guillotine. This is how he handles crisis situations to close a case. And I highlighted that, John, because we talked about how wonky the network thing gets with Columbo this series. We talk about how it shifts in perspective and shifts tone a little bit as it furthers down the road. And just from here, I don't see how I can have any episode as a favorite episode over this one.
I think, with that, you're talking about a couple of things. I think, the one thing we haven't talked about in the Columbo Files so far is Peter Falk specifically, outside of the differences between what he is in Prescription Murder versus the rest of the show proper. I think it's a testament to his skill as an actor that he is able to appeal to a very human moment. He appeals to Beth's better nature, where it's like this, you don't need to resort to this. You never needed to resort to this.
Besides, you're too classy a woman.
Exactly. And, especially in a time where we are hearing people of color ask the police, please stop killing us. And all the police do is just respond with more violence.
Yeah.
To see a police officer, and we already know Columbo does not carry a gun. Nope. To see a police officer just de-escalate like this, which is all anyone is asking for, is phenomenal. And, credit to Peter Falk, Bochko, and the rest of the crew for this episode, because I think that is a testament as to why people love this character, is that he finds a way. There's always a way. And there's a way where everybody gets to go home, even if that home is going to be prison.
Yep. And John, with that, I don't know how else we can end it, because you just so eloquently put the period at the end of this beautiful episode sentence.
So, if I may, Anthony, I will close this out as I only know how. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another file in the Columbo Files. I have been one of your hosts, John Soares. Joining me, as always, my brother, my podcast buddy, the man, the myth, the legend, the booty himself, Antonicus Gluteus Maximus IV. On behalf of both of us in the Ludic Lounge, we'd like to just thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, this is Peter Falk, and you've been listening to an episode of the Columbo Files, hosted by the Ludic Lounge. And just one more thing. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Ludic Lounge, Anthony at RojoLoco44, and John at just_John_0891. Or feel free to email us at theludiclounge@gmail.com.